back to another episode of More Sewing with Michele. On today's episode, I have got two super handy tools featured from Riley Blake. Now, some of you may wonder, who is Riley Blake? Well, Riley Blake is a company, not a person, and they started off in 2008. Think of that, only 2008, designing fabrics. Now they've got tools and notions and fabrics and supplies. They really have their thumb, we'll say, on the pulse of the quilting industry. I love their fabrics. They're always high quality, and they kind of cater to the modern quilt with a sophisticated style. So Riley Blake is definitely one of my top picks. So I've got the two cools here. We have the pin wand, which I will demonstrate, and then we also have a tape measure. Now you may wonder, why a tape measure? But I'm going to tell you why this tape measure is pretty amazing. And then to top it all off, I'm going to talk about finishing your quilts today. So I got to be quiet here and not give too much away on the intro. Let's get going on today's More Sewing with Michele. Okay, so let me get talking about these handy tools that I brought in from Riley Blake. So the first is the pin wand. Here it is there. You'll see that it's white, it's got a grip, easy to hold, and it's got that area so it's easy to pick up as well. Now, the pin wand, why would you need it? Well, if you're like me, sometimes you're walking around in your sewing studio and your foot finds the pin for you, which could be super painful. We don't want that. So if you have a pin wand, you can take it over your carpet where you sew, where your pins might drop, and be able to pick them up with a breeze. Not difficult, super easy to do, and this magnet on here is super strong. Now, like the other magnet that I showed you before that picks up, the retractable pin wand, this one has a larger magnet, so you're able to pick up more at one time because it can accommodate the different sizes and the amount of them. So I love that. Now, Riley Blake always does a great job with their logo, which is this cute little bluebird. It's everywhere, and I love it. And then on top of that, they've added quilt blocks. You can never go wrong in quilt blocks in my book. So I love that they've added some decorations to make it cutified. I don't know if cutified is a word, but it is in my book. So let me show you how easy it is to use this. So the first thing I'm picking up are these pins. They are super secure. They're not falling. I had one type of pin picker up before that I would use, and the pins would fall when I would shake. So this one is going to keep them wrangled and on your pin wand with a breeze. So then when you're ready to take them off, you simply slide them off and you're ready to go. Super strong. So it will also pick up bulldog clips and other items that are metal in your house that may fall. Think about it. Nails. I've got some tacks here, some of these large thumb tacks from my cork board that I use. Paper clips, anything that you want to wrangle that's metal. This is going to be the tool for you to do it. So I love my Riley Blake pin wand, and you will too. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the wonderful tape measure. Now, it's just like your husband's tape measure. If your husband is like mine, it's locked in his toolbox in the garage. I don't know if he locks it because of me, but I have my own tools. But this one is super cool. I love that it's white. It's got a wonderful handle. So if you want to put it on your wrist when you're traveling or when you want to keep it secure, easy to do. It also has, just like the manly versions, it's got a clip so that you can clip it on your pants, your apron, on something fabric, your shirt, wherever you want. You're going to be able to clip it on. So it's got two ways to secure it. And then, of course, it's got those cute little Riley Blake logo and designs on the front. Now, this one also has those regular features. So you see that it has a thing to clip here so you can hold it in place. Not like those, measuring tapes that we've had for years in our sewing kits. This one is meant to actually measure, and it's serious about measuring. And then on top of that, look, it's got white tape, and then it also has blue lettering. And it also has little quilt moffets on here, as well as the Riley Blake logo. I absolutely love it. If I'm going to use a tape measure, I want to use something cutified, and that's what this is. Now, on top of that, it's got one other feature, that it has a locking device where you can lock it in place, and that way it's going to stay there if you're securing a certain measurement and you want to make sure that that stays where it is. So that is some of the features of it. Now, the main feature, and the reason why I brought this baby in from the start, is because of the length. Now, I have talked, real briefly about the other measuring tapes that we've had in our sewing kits for years. And I'm not saying that they're not useful, but sometimes they're just not practical. If I'm doing a king size quilt or a queen size quilt and I need to measure from corner to corner to see if the thing's plumb, or I need to do one side, oftentimes those tape measures are just not long enough. And if you really want a secure and correct measurement, you need something that's long enough to handle the job. Now, this Riley Blake tape measure is 12 feet long. Now, in a quilter, that's 144 inches. That's going to measure anything that I need to measure that I've quilted. If I'm quilting something over 12 feet, check me in somewhere because I need to take a break. That's just too big, too long, and it's not anything I'm interested in doing. But for those large quilts, this is going to have the capability to get your measurements done and get them done precisely. So I love it, and I think it's something that every sewer and every quilter should have, is a tape measure that is long enough to measure what we need to do. I love that we had tape measures before, but whoever made them, they didn't really think about the length that some of us need for when we're quilting. So you're going to want to get this little guy as well. And this is the Riley Blake tape measure. Once again, 12 feet long. So there you go. The two items that I have today from Riley Blake. And don't forget, if you haven't picked up yet, we have our lip balm and also the hand lotion from Riley Blake that was featured a couple episodes ago. So you can pick those up as well. So let's get going on talking about finishing your quilt and what that means to me. So I know you want to pick up these handy tools today. And in order to do that, there's two different ways that you can go about it. You can go to moors-sew.com, or you can click on the link in the description that'll take you to the More Sewing with Michele landing page, where you can pick up the pinned wand by Riley Blake and also the handy measuring tape. And did I mention 12 feet long? Both of these items are going to be a wonderful addition to your sewing room. They're super useful and they're handy, as I said before. So pick them up today. Don't forget to use this coupon code when you purchase your items today for an additional savings on More Sewing with Michele. So we've all been there. We finished piecing our quilt top, and now what? Now what are we going to do? So oftentimes this is the amount of time that I really reflect on my quilt. I look at the quilt and I look at the colors. I look at the style of the quilt. I look to see if it's really busy, if the fabrics kind of overtake. And then I decide at that point, the next thought is the thread. Do I want my thread to show? Do I want my stitching to show? Do I want it to sink into the quilt so that no one knows that there's no stitching that has made my quilt sandwich stay together? There's so many things to think about. And oftentimes, once I finish that particular quilt, I really reflect, okay, the next thing I'm going to do is completed by doing my quilting process, and that could either be straight line quilting, free motion, I could stitch in the ditch, I could have a rough edge quilt. There's so many options. And I love to like navigate through all those different options every time I quilt. So I don't really do anything the same. There are some things that I absolutely love. I love to do free motion and I love to do straight line quilting. And I think because of the type of quilter I am, those lend themselves to my style of quilting really well. So that's often what I do. Now, there's one other option that I've talked about, jokingly in the past, is where you can quilt by check. And what that means is that you write a check, send it off to a long armor, and then they do the work for you. But on all my quilts here, I finish them from start to finish on my domestic machines in my studio downstairs. So I have the capability of doing free motion, and also I love straight line quilting. I do have lots of things that help me, tools that get me along the way. I have pounce pads, I have, marking devices, I have rulers. So there's so many things, and I'm not going to get into that. All I want to do is talk about the thought process and finishing your quilts here today. All those other things will come on other episodes of More Sewing with Michele. So what I want to do is show you a few different things, and I've got my little handy dandy close-up camera here so that I can really show you the details of these individual things here today. So one of the first things that I think is pretty much so the basic. This is just a little placemat. It's actually was from one of the episodes that I had shown before. And on this placemat, you will see that all that I did was some straight line stitching around. Now, a lot of people will do what's called stitch in the ditch. And let me give you my thought process on stitch in the ditch. Stitch in the ditch is so difficult to be precise. And I've done it many, many times, and it drives me nuts where everything will be completely perfect, and all of a sudden one stitch is out of the ditch. And that stitch sticks out like a sore thumb, and it drives me absolutely crazy. So what I started doing many years ago is making it so that I don't have those crazy stitches that annoy me. And what I do is I call it stitch around the ditch. So rather than being in the ditch, I will go directly a few stitches on the side, and I will do stitch around the ditch. And you will see up close here, that's what I've done. I've done stitch around the ditch on these particular hexes. And that way, I know that my quilt will be secured and I won't have those crazy stitches that make me nuts. So the next thing would be another straight line quilting. This is another little block that was featured on More Sewing with Michele. Now this one you will see, if you look up close, I did a mirror image straight line quilting around the pinwheels. And that way you will get the definition and the fun of the quilting, but it mimics the design that I have. And that's also a really easy, fun design that anyone can do on anything that they've made. The next thing, as you will see, is another one of the featured quilts. This is from the Silhouettes. And on this quilt, what I love is on all of the blocks, you will see I used a zigzag. And I secured every block over the seam. Now, I did that on the whole quilt, with the exception of where the design is for the applique. And on those pieces, I did do some free motion. And you will notice on them that they have a rough edge feel. Now, I love rough edge. I think it goes right along with that chenille feel to things. And I love it. I think it looks rustic. And I absolutely, if I have a choice between having something turned under, I generally will go for a rough edge look. I absolutely adore it. So on this one, this is reverse applique with a rough edge, but also notice I'm mimicking the circles on here. So it's a little bit of a few things. You will see that I have the mirror image, straight line quilting, and then I also have the rough edge. And because this was a reverse applique, I wanted those circles to really pop, and the rough edge does that for me. Now the next thing I have here to show is my Pebble quilt. So this quilt, needless to say, is nothing but cut out pieces of little pebbles to make it look like glass on a beach. So on this one, I absolutely did free motion quilting, and I went around each individual item 3 times. I used to be joked around by some of my friends that none of my quilts are ever going to fall apart because I go around so many times with my free motion. But I just want to make sure that it's secure. And you will also see that I did some free motion details on top of the starfish to make sure that he, pops and he has his glory too. But on the background fabric here, I did nothing because it was so busy with all these individual items. I didn't think the background quilt needed anything. And because I have so many stitches around, it's secure and ready to go. The next one, I did just straight line quilting, and I did it in a grid fashion. So that will take care of it, the whole quilt. And this one's they're about 1 inch apart, and I did the whole thing with that grid pattern. And I love that look. Once again, I think I told you I like straight line quilting. Now this quilt is one of my favorite quilts that I've ever done. And it's a combination of a few things. But let me get it out so you can see it. So you can see I have a great big star. But on the star, I didn't want to take away from the beauty of the star. So on the star itself, if you look at the close-up, I did straight line quilting, and I did it 1/4 inch about away from the actual seam. And I followed each individual seam so that it has a security, but it also gives that detail that I love. And then in the white areas, you will see that on this one, I did free motion quilting. I have some spirals, I have pebbles, and then I have a little bit of other fun stuff in there too. And that one I just did a free motion as I'm going along, doing pebbles and doing my spirals to make it fun. And then I did do straight line quilting right around that star to make sure that it's secure too. So this has a little bit of everything. I want to show you one other thing on the border. Look at the border here. So you will see that it has a pattern, and I love to do this. Mimic the design or the colors in the quilt and add straight quilting. So not only does it give definition to every other of the stripes, but it also adds just a little element that I love. So that's that quilt. Now this one's really big. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I'm just going to get up close. It's actually a bear. But you will see on it, I did a little bit. I love combining free motion, straight line quilting, and also different types of straight line quilting. So you will see here, I just did an arc on this area. I did a grid pattern here, which these are probably about 1/2 inch squares. I did some mirror image here, free motion on the eyeball. So it's a lot of different things. So if you're doing straight line quilting, you can also section out pieces and have them look detailed with different types of straight line quilting. And it's a lot of fun, and it'll give your basic, machine a run for its money where you can do some of the fun elements on a large quilt or something that would be done on a long arm. So I love that. I love the feel of a quilt that has, a grid and then it goes to lines. I love that, the features that it gives when you quilt it. So let me bring over a couple more. Now the rest of these that I'm going to show you, they're all combination quilts, meaning that they're not just one type of stitch, they're multiple types of stitching. Now this is the Phoebe quilt, and I love Phoebe, but you will see on the background here, there was big, large areas. Let me hold it up so you can see from around the flower that didn't have any detail. So what I wanted to do in that area is I added my own diamond pattern, and I simply used a 6x24 ruler and marked out each section. So you can see this is 6 inches apart here. And then I added another line, and then I repeated it in the opposite direction. And I used my pencil and just drew out the grid, sewn it, And then around Phoebe, though, let me get up here where the petals are. I love using my decorative stitches, and I tell you that there are so many on your machine that you probably ignore, and they get jealous that that straight stitch gets used all the time. At least that's what my machines tell me. Anyways, so around here I added decorative stitches. So there's some straight line stitching here, but use those decorative stitches on your machine to accent your finished quilt. On this quilt, I also took some liberties. It is a little crow shadow in a tree. But on the quilting part, now this one is a good one to talk about because it's a crazy quilt background with a black silhouette. So I didn't need the stitching to show up. So I used just a very neutral thread, you will see on here. And then I used black around the detail of the crow. But on here, I did the same thing where I used my ruler. So this is 6 inches apart here. And then I stitched a 1/4 inch away on either side. I did a grid pattern. And then you will see right here in between, I did a meandering stitch just on my own to give it one more fun little element to this very crazy quilt. So the stitching here, you'll see that I have the grids here and they go here. And then I also have that meandering stitch that gives it just a little bit more flair and fling to it. And I love doing that on all of my quilts. Now this, going back to using, this is my little home quilt. Whoops, oh my goodness, I hit my camera. But on this quilt, I did a combination of both things too. You will see that I did stitch around the ditch, and then I used a blanket stitch and a zigzag stitch to go around the lettering, which is perfectly okay. And this is another one of those reasons why when I'm done piecing my quilt together, I look at it and I kind of let my quilt tell me what it wants to do. So the lettering to me, even though they were appliqued down, they wanted to really stand out and pop. So that's why I did the blanket stitch around them. And then you'll notice the other elements here, we have a bee and a flower, and I just hit that close-up camera again. You'll see around those, I did free motion quilting. So once again, 3 times around with your machine. And then there's also the rough edge element around that too. So rough edge is not around the lettering, but it will be around the other elements that I have there. And then on the very bottom down here where the quilt blocks is, I also used a different type of blanket stitch to accent those quilt blocks. So just a fun thing. Like I said, I like using multiple things when I do my quilting. Now this is just a wall hanging that I did just for fun. And on here, it's got a few things again too. So it has decorative stitches around the edge. I've got straight stitches, straight line quilting. I've got mirror image stitching here. And then I have a little bit of free motion around. But I want to show you another thing that I did. Let me get up close here. I also added some of my embroidery floss. I hand stitched to give another accent. And I also did it on this flower here. You'll see that I knotted some little accents. So don't be afraid to add additional things to your quilt once you finish them. Now this is another one where there's multiples. So I've got rough edge quilting and straight line quilting on here, and also free motion. And I wanted to show you this one because I want you to see these flowers. Now I talk about rough edge quilting a lot. And the more I wash this quilt, the more those flowers are going to fray. And I'm going to love it even more. I love the look of frayed edges. So I've done straight line quilting. I've done stitch around the ditch. But these flowers, they're literally, the ends are left loose so that they fray. And you can see this one right here. It's already started to fray a little bit. And I love it. It gives it a 3D type of look to the quilt. And I love that it makes those flowers look a little bit more unique. So another fun thing. And then if you look close on the llamas here, lots of free motion on there. And then I added, I call it like frizzle stitches when I do free motion. I deliberately go over, especially on animals, to make it look like they've got a wild hair or two, because as you know, hair doesn't always lay completely flat. You've got little wispy ones. So I love adding that detail on any animal that I'm doing. And with that said, we have my pumpkin quilt here, and on that we have the same type of deal. So I have that rough edge feel to my flowers. I've done free motion multiple times to give it definition on there. I've done some zigzags here for the stem. And once again, we have that frizzled edge there. And then I have a crow's foot stitch around. So lots of different elements on this particular one. On the actual pumpkin, I've done straight line quilting. So, and then on the very bottom, on the grass area, let me show you, get it on the camera. You can see, like the other one where I did frizzle, if I wanted to add like little stitch art, I've done that as well. And then let's go into some free motion details. So I often just will come up with a design. I will take a paper and a pen and just draw out something. And the trick is you don't want to lift up your pen. You want to make some pattern on your paper. And then I put it next to my machine and I just reference it as I'm doing my free motion. And that's what I did here. If you look close, you can see I have leaves and then I have little loops, a leaf again, and then loops, a leaf again, and loops. So just a fun little free motion design that I created myself. And then I also did stitch around the ditch around the little block that I have there. So lots of different fun things, but I love doing free motion and I love coming up with my own personal stitches. And that brings us to this quilt here. So we have stitch around the ditch. And then on this one, I just did this meandering back and forth. It kind of reminds me of the way wood looks. It could be a flow of something, water or something, but I just love the way that it looks just going back and forth across that white section to give it a little bit of detail. And then my last quilt, this is another big one. It is some stars. It was featured on one of the episodes, I think it was the first episode I did. No, it wasn't the first one, but it was one of those. Anyways, this has got a combination of all things too. So we have stitch around the ditch. We have, this was used with a stencil. So I have some leaves and some loops there. I have a dragonfly in the center part there. On the borders, I have decorative stitches and straight line quilting. So it's a big quilt. It's a really big quilt. But this one kind of features lots of different things as well. And I love to combine things to make them unique for me. So that's my take. That's what I have to share with finishing your quilt. So the next quilt that you finish, you pieced, I want you to think about, okay, what do I want to show? What do I want to stand up? What do I want to disappear? Do I want my stitches to be in the ditch? Do I want them next to the ditch? Do I want to use decorative stitch, zigzag, free motion? Do I want it to be rough edge? Do I want it to be, frizzled? There's so many questions that you can ask, but I literally will look at my quilt, just kind of stare at it for a couple times. It may be helpful for you to take a picture elevated, looking down at your quilt, and then look at that and go, okay, what do I want to showcase? What do I want to feature? Do I want to do, free motion and draw out the design? It's just limitless, the things that you can do. But I hope I've sparked a little bit of creativity in you, and you'll use it in your next quilt that you finish. So I have had such a blast. Thank you for joining me today for more Sewing with Michele. And don't forget to pick up those Riley Blake handy tools at moors-sew.com. And you can click on the link in the description if you prefer. Don't forget to use your coupon code, and I look forward to seeing you on the next More Sewing with Michele. Until then, bye-bye!